Well, good morning, all. Good to see you this morning. Austin mentioned about the hymn sing on May 31st, and that is a little bit of my error. Each week, Valerie gives me the bulletin to preview and says, here, take a look, make sure everything's right. And I looked at it and I go, yeah, it looks good. I neglected to put in there that one of the values that we want to promote here at Stumptown is being generous. And so there's different times people come to us, organizations come and say, can we host something at your congregation and your church? And our default answer is yes, we will help you. And Mennonite Life approached us and asked if they could do a hymn sing here in connection with the 500-year anniversary of the Anabaptist Reformation, the movement. And so that's on May 31st, which is a Saturday. And so all of you who are correcting, you say, hey, this isn't right. We always do a hymn sing on Sunday night. You're correct. This is a different group. We're just providing the space, but we wanted you to know. And you're, I'm sure, welcome to be here on that evening. We'll have Valerie put some more information in the bulletin as far as the details on what that looks like. You ever look around at others and you go, what's wrong with me? What's my problem? Not that there's something extremely deficient as far as your mental or your intellect or something like that, but you look around and you see in the lives of others things that are happening. There's something happening in the lives of others, and you say, well, if they're experiencing that, why am I not experiencing that? What do they know that I don't? Whether it be joy or happiness or contentment or just a presence of God around you, you look at somebody else and you say, there's something there that they have, and we say, what's wrong with me? Why am I not doing that? It could be called comparison, but it's not really comparison in an envious, coveting kind of way, but wondering, how can I better myself? What can I experience more? A number of years ago, I made a comparison to another church as what they were experiencing, and I was hoping to make the example of, look at them, they're bearing fruit, what can we learn from them? And there was a well-meaning person that really busted on me after the service, and they said, you shouldn't compare yourself to others. And I said, well, I'm not really comparing in the sense of envious, I'm just saying they've experienced something better than we have. When we lived in Harleysville, one time we had a snowstorm, and the temperatures stayed a sustained colder time for a little while, and I came home from work one day and rounded the corner in the car, and I looked over the row of houses that included ours, and I noticed that we had no snow on our roof. Well, all our other neighbors did. And I compared our house to somebody else's, and I said, there's a problem. We have self-defrosting roof, which it doesn't take any enormous brights to realize we were losing a lot of energy off the top. So we corrected that later, but I was comparing our house to others, again, not in an envious kind of way, but of saying, there's a piece of information that I see by comparing myself to others. Last week was Resurrection Sunday. We marked the day when Jesus freed us from the bondage of sin and death. The story is one that is incredibly powerful, but it can be rather hard for us as well. Because the story goes that Jesus was handed over to death on a cross by people just like us. We read the story in the Bible, and the week before they're saying, "Hail him, King." And just a few days later, they're saying, "Take him and nail him to a cross, kill him." And we can be a finicky people and shift that quickly. But Jesus died. He went to the cross. He was put in a tomb. And there was done. It's finished. But not completely finished, right? But God raised him from the dead so that we would have life. And before Jesus went to the cross, he told his disciples, his followers, he foreshadowed, he gave them insight. This is what's going to happen. And just a few ways that he did that, Matthew 20, it says that Jesus was going to Jerusalem, and he took the 12 aside, the 12 disciples, and he says, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death, and he will be handed over to the Gentiles to be mocked, flogged, and crucified, and on the third day raised to life. Jesus told the disciples and told his followers what was going to happen. In John 14, it says that Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father except through me. Again, he was defining that Jesus is, or he is the way to God, and we were to experience him. And then John 14, as Jesus is getting ready to go to the cross, just before that, the upper room experience, he's talking with the disciples. He says, verily, truly, I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works that I have been doing. And they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father. And whatever I do, and I will do whatever you ask in my name, so the Father will be glorified in the Son. You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it. If you love me, keep my commands. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. These are the things that Jesus did for us. He went to the cross. God raised him from the dead so we'd have life. He says there's a fullness in that, and a fullness, a richness in experiencing that. We celebrated that last week, Easter Sunday. We hear the echoes again of the resurrection story in our songs and our readings today. So I have to ask, are we experiencing this fullness? Are we experiencing the fullness of God? Do we look at others and say, there's something happening in somebody else's life? What is it? Do we do that? Again, not comparing to the sense of I envy them, I'm coveting, but I see something in somebody else. Are we experiencing the fullness of God? Are we celebrating the resurrection of Jesus on a daily basis? Christmas and Easter are two of the biggest things in the church, right? The birth of Jesus, the death and resurrection of Jesus. So many times Christmas, how many of you have this experience? You have this wonderful celebration, and then everything is finished, and all you have is these garbage bags full of wrapping paper all over the living room. And then you quickly clean it up, throw it away, and go on to life again. Easter's a little bit the same way. We celebrate, but do we just wrap it up, put the leftovers in the refrigerator, and we say, that's done, let's go on to life again? Or are we experiencing the fullness of what God has given us, what he's promised us through life with him? There was a couple people that soon after the resurrection that we see in Luke 24, they were walking along a road. The road to Emmaus, is we're told. They were walking. And they were confused. They were trying to make sense of what they had just heard and seen over the last couple days. And we read here in Luke 24, verse 19, that about Jesus and Nazareth, they replied because Jesus said and joined them along the road and asked them what they were talking about. And they said they were talking about Jesus of Nazareth. And this is what they described about Jesus. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priest and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death. They crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one. who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it's the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of the women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but they did not find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said. But they did not see Jesus. They did not see Jesus. Do you hear the tone in these two people as they're talking about Jesus? There's a bewilderment, a puzzlement. We had hoped. There's a tone of, this is the story we hear, but we're not quite sure about it. We haven't quite lived in it. We haven't quite experienced it yet. But they did not see Jesus. Talking about Peter and John. They did not see Jesus. And so there was perhaps a uncertainty, a suspicion. And ironically, if you know the story, these two men are walking along the road to Emmaus, and Jesus is walking alongside of them. So, how in the world could they not see Jesus? Why were they so blind? The scriptures tell us their eyes were blinded, but how and what did that look like? We don't get the detail there in the scriptures. They walked along with the resurrected Jesus, and they didn't see him. The passage we read out of this morning, out of John, it says something parallel in there. He was in the world. Jesus was in the world. And the world was made known through him, but the world did not recognize him. We have this today. Jesus is walking alongside of us, and the world does not recognize him. So not only are we experiencing, and I'm wondering, are we experiencing the resurrection every day? Are we recognizing Jesus walking alongside of us? Just who is this Jesus that we might be missing? John 1 gives us a beautiful summary of who this Jesus is. It's so powerful. The language may be a little bit weird at times, but we want to kind of narrow or get into that a little bit. But it was read for us. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In the beginning, that's clearly hearkening back to Genesis 1. In the beginning. And how did God create the earth? How did God create all of things? Spoke them, the Word. And the language here in the Greek is, I don't want to get into the grammar because it might be a little bit deeper than we want to go, but it is clearly pointing to more than just speaking a word, but the Word, and speaking about Jesus as being the one. Verse 2, he was with God in the beginning. Jesus was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind, and that light shines into darkness. So much packed in those couple verses. God. In the Hebrew, the word God, the word Elohim, is technically plural. In the beginning was gods. Not multiple gods, but the Trinity. The Father, the Son, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. All there in the beginning. And John is declaring Jesus is the light. This is the one that Jesus wants to reveal us to himself. This is the one we walk alongside of. This is the one that is with us. This is the Jesus that gives us power and authority. Are we experiencing the resurrection power each day? Is Jesus walking with you and you just don't see it? A couple years ago, when I was taking a group of students to Honduras for a missions trip, we had two of our students that still had foreign passports, Kenyan passports. And so it was a bit of a wrestling match with the country of Honduras to get the permission for them to go to get the visas. And I think we made 3 or 4 trips down to Washington, D.C., to the Honduran consulate to try to get these visas, and they just kept on throwing roadblocks after roadblocks after roadblocks before us. And so one day we were going down, and I was resolved, I am not leaving Washington until we get these visas. And we had everything we needed except for one step. We needed a letter from the Kenyan embassy that said it was okay for these students to travel. And I looked at the two and I go, oh boy, what do we do now? And I thought, aha, the Kenyan embassy is 3 blocks down the road. We're going to go. So we walk down the road, we walk into the Kenyan embassy, and we tell our sad story to the person at the desk. And the person we're talking to goes, I don't know why they do that. Wait here, I'll take care of it for you. So I handed this lady our passports, or the passports of the student, and she went back, and we sat in the waiting room for about an hour, and she came back and said, here, this will take care of what you need. Thank you very much. Great story. But the interesting thing is, it wasn't until later I realized the person I was speaking to was the Kenyan ambassador to the United States. I go walking in the door, the lady sitting at the desk is the ambassador from Kenya to the United States. I had no idea. She was the nicest lady you could ever imagine. She was so helpful. She had a lot of power. She could write those letters, sign her name, say, here, give this to the consulate of Honduras, and everything will be done. I didn't even know. How many times do we walk around with life and Jesus is by our side and we don't even know? We're blind to it. We don't see it. So how can we recognize the fullness of God in our lives? I don't oftentimes do this, but if you're taking notes, I have 4 R's this morning. How can we experience the fullness of God? First, there's recognition. God opens our eyes. The Emmaus disciples, the Emmaus Road disciples, they were walking along and they didn't realize that that was Jesus until Jesus opened their eyes. John 1:10 says the world didn't recognize him. But just like meeting the ambassador to the United States from Kenya, God opens our eyes. God gives us the recognition sometimes to see him around us. Are we aware? Are we aware that Jesus is near? Do we have eyes? Do we have a posture that even says, I'm looking for him in my life? The second R is reception. How can we experience the fullness of God? Are we actively receiving Jesus? John 1 says, yet all who did receive him, to those who believe in his name, he gave the right to be called the children of God. The children of God. He gave us the right to receive that. Are we at a posture that we're ready to receive the risen Lord into our life? The Emmaus disciples, later on the story, they invited him in. It says in the story that Jesus was going to continue on his way, and they said, no. You need to stay with us. They invited him in. And in doing so, that's when they saw the act of him breaking the bread and pouring the wine. And they said, this is Jesus. It was an act of hospitality, of getting ready. Are we actively receiving Jesus, or at least preparing ourselves to receive him each day? So many of our lives are a rush and a blur of activity, aren't they? Somebody just asked me this morning how I'm doing, and I said, I'm busy. And he just sort of chuckled, and he says, well, how's Are you going to make that better? And I said, well, part of it's my own fault. I need to fix that. And so many of us get drawn into the busyness of life, especially for you that are young families. The morning can be chaotic, right? There's a bustle of activity. You got to get to work. You got to get breakfast. You got to get the kids to school. You got to get them taken care of. There's the household responsibilities. There's the errands to run. And there's just a whole multitude of things that we need to do. It's a whirlwind. And we think, when things calm down, I will be able to receive some other things into my life. On the other end of the spectrum is some of you who are seniors. Some of you do have some extra time. You've established some rhythms in your life. The workplace isn't so pressing on you anymore. You have decades of spiritual experience and practice under your belt. You know routines. You've done some things in life. And I'm thinking of young families in particular right now. I know you don't need one more thing to do in your life, but I wonder if you, like others, or like the Emmaus Road people, can invite Jesus into your life on a daily basis. What if, while you're brushing your teeth, something you do every day, while you're opening the refrigerator and getting the cereal out or the milk out for the children for breakfast, what if you just say, Jesus, I invite you into this day? I wonder if it might be the 7 most powerful words you say all day long. Because I know life is busy. But seniors, those of you that do have some discretionary time, I've seen it. I've been with you in some of your homes. I've seen your patterns and your behaviors. What if, when you're enjoying your time of breakfast and you're sitting across the breakfast table from your spouse and you're saying, what are you doing today? And there's time. What if you would text one of the young families and say, hey, I thought about you this morning, and I remember what it was like when we were raising the children. I'm praying for you. I want to bless you. It could be super powerful to help others receive Jesus. And in the process, you can posture yourself to receive Jesus. Number of years ago, I have a sister who still lives in Virginia. And a number of years ago, I was down there for a meeting or something. I forget why I was even there, but I stayed overnight at her home. It was just me. Yvonne wasn't with me at the time. And I got up and I had breakfast with the whole family, my sister, my brother-in-law, and their 2 children. The whole household was there. And as they were getting ready to finish breakfast and go out the door for their day, my brother-in-law, Lawrence, said, okay, time for family prayer time. And I didn't know that they did this. This was a practice that I've never seen demonstrated in the house, in their house before. I had never stayed overnight with them before in this kind of setting. And they gathered in the living room, the 4 of them, and they invited me into the circle. And my brother-in-law just led a simple time. He said, okay, what's happening today? And what do we need prayer about? And then he led a short prayer for his family. And I thought, that's beautiful. Why didn't I ever think of that? I should have been doing that when I was raising the children in our household. Some of you are at a place where it feels a little bit too late, but others are you at a place where maybe you could do that, and that would be a beautiful way of inviting Jesus into your presence and saying, I receive you. How can we experience the fullness of God? The third R, revelation. We experience God through the revelation of Jesus Christ. John 1:14, the Word, Jesus, the Word, became flesh and made his dwelling among us. That word dwelling is so rich and so big. I've done that word study before, what dwelling means. Meno is in the Greek. And I've never quite got deep enough on it. I always feel like I'm lacking for what it means, but there's just that rich sense of God almost in your gut and being with you. And he says, The Word became flesh and dwelled and was with us. God dwells with us. John also says that no one has ever seen God, but God has been made known in Jesus, and Jesus dwells in us. Think about that for a minute. Nobody has ever seen God except for Jesus, and Jesus dwells in us. Wow. Jesus continues to reveal himself to us. The disciples on the Emmaus Road, as they understood who this resurrected Jesus was right in their presence, it says their spirits burned within them. There was something that was revelation revealed to them in their spirit that he is here. You ever have one of those quiet nudges that you should do something? You see somebody, whether they have a point of need or they just stumbled or they just need a door open for them, and it's like somebody should do something. Yvonne and I have discovered that these quiet nudges are more often than not inner promptings from the Spirit of God. They say, I want you to do something. Just a small voice, and it seems like they're so easy to ignore. And we found that if we can capture them, if we respond to them, those nudges, they are truly a blessing, and they become a way that Jesus is revealed in us and through us. Just this past week, Yvonne saw a neighbor that just moved in up the street from us. We have a little bit of an unusual setting, 2 houses up from us. A local church bought this house, and they use it to host missionaries that come in. And so we see a revolving door of people that come through that house. And she saw some new people up there, and she went up to say hello to them and quickly found that their story was a bit troubling. And she thought, maybe I should go take them a bag of food. It could have been easily ignored. But she responded to it, and she shoved them things in a bag. Some granola bars, some nothing extraordinary. Maybe a can of soup or something. We didn't break the bank by going up the road and handing her this bag, but she went up there and did that. And the lady responded to her through a text and said, I am so blessed. I feel like I have a mutual sister in Christ just through the activity of what you're doing. Christ being revealed in us. And we've learned that we need to respond to that burning within us, because that's the revelation of God within you. So I want to give to us just a challenge. Take a first responder commitment. We talk about first responders, those people that go for fires and ambulance. But what if you be a first responder in the hunch that comes within your spirit? The next time you get one of those hunches that says, I ought to call so-and-so, I ought to write them a note, I ought to do this, I ought to do that, I ought to do whatever. Instead of thinking, I ought to, what if you capture that immediately and say, I hear it, I'm going to do it, and you respond to it immediately? What's the worst thing that could happen? You'd bless somebody and they go, I didn't need that. Be blessed. Who's going to turn down a helping hand? But what if we would, out of obedience, just respond in whatever God is prompting us, and we would see God's revelation in our lives? How can we experience the fullness of God? Number 4, renewal. Renewal. John 1:6. There's a phrase in John 1:6 that's a little puzzling. It's put together in a way that doesn't quite make sense. It reads, out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. Grace in place of grace. What does he mean there? This grace upon grace, this grace in place of grace, is a word of an abundance of grace. Like the waves of a shore just keep on coming up, grace upon grace given to us. John 1:17 says, "For the law was given through Moses, but grace came through Jesus Christ." Jesus continued to give the law. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "I have not come to abolish the law. I have come to fulfill the law." He hasn't come to take away. He's come to give more abundance of grace. The resurrection gives us an abundance, a renewal, day after day. Are we living in there? A daily emphasis of grace. We can't live on yesterday's grace, but we need to live on today's grace. Are we experiencing the fullness of God? Each evening, I take my cell phone and I plug it in and I put it on my desk. It's not in our bedroom. If you ever have an emergency and you call me, I may not answer because it's on my desk. So just a heads up. But why do you do that? You probably do the same thing. You plug in your cell phone just about every night. Why do you do that? Because the battery runs out of power, right? You use it through the day and you have activities or whatever, and the battery starts draining, and so you plug it in overnight and it recharges for you. Now, how many of you notice that when you do that over 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years on the same cell phone, it seems like my battery seems like it's wearing out. I'm losing charge. You know, it's noon and I'm already starting to lose charge. And, you know, what do I do now? The battery it doesn't charge back and it doesn't stay powered forever. Things deteriorate. We live in a fallen world. Things are breaking down around us. They don't work the way they used to. But what if you had a phone that when it begins to drain, that when you realize you're not getting the life out of your battery anymore, what if it automatically renewed and gave you a brand new battery again? So you never lose any power. The times I've gotten a brand new phone, it's like my battery lasts for like 2 days. This is cool. I don't even have to plug it in every night. What if every time your battery deteriorates, you automatically get a new one? That's grace upon grace. As soon as you need more of Jesus, there's more to be experienced and more to know. You don't have to worry about the spiritual capacity of Jesus diminishing over time. It's not going to wear out. It just increases and goes on. Are we experiencing the fullness of God? Each week, I put together a little bit of a follow-up, a little application question we use, and we send it out to you folks online. And worship planners were encouraging me there that they said, you know what, some of those questions aren't too bad. You ought to make sure you tell everybody about it. So here's the question that's going to be posted online, and I'll give to all of you as well. Where are you experiencing the greatest resurrection gap in your life? Where are you experiencing the greatest distance between what we've celebrated at Easter and what daily routine looks like? And then how can you bridge that gap? How can you experience more of the fullness of God? Do you need to be ready to receive him? Do you need to be open to his revelation? Do you need to recognize him? Do you need to understand the renewal, the grace after grace that's in your life? The Emmaus story, it teaches us something profound about experiencing the resurrection daily. When those persons recognized Jesus, everything was changed. Their hearts burned within them. It's my heart that each of us would experience that same thing. that Christ's presence will be so real in our lives. By the time we get to next Easter, it'll be like, oh, we've been doing this all year long. Can we experience the fullness of God? Instead of people looking, or instead of you looking out at people and go, what's wrong with me? What if others would look at you and say, there's something in that person that I've got to find. Tell me. Because you're living in the fullness of God, grace after grace. Let's pray. God, we recognize you're walking beside us today. And we thank you that you're here and your presence is rich and dwells with us, even when we don't recognize it. We receive your presence and invite you into this moment. We open our eyes to your revelation and the general promptings. Renew us with your fresh grace today, replacing yesterday's with today's abundance. Lord, come that we might be able to live in the fullness of the resurrection today and every day. I pray this in your mighty name. Amen.